Hi, this is Abraham Walker, and I'm here with Jason Rubin. We're going to get into who Jason is in just a few minutes. First off, I want to tell you that this program was originally thought about, or I created this idea in the spring of 2019. I was thinking about my experience in college and how when I was taking accounting at the University of New Orleans, I was doing well in my classes, and my professor was talking to me about a career in accounting. And I explained to him that I did not know what an accountant was. I don't know what an accountant does. I have no idea how much money they make. I don't know what their day-to-day life is. And he looked at me he was very concerned. He was like, Abraham, I think you need to know like what you're gonna do after you get your degree. And I was like, I never thought about what I'm going to do after I get my degree. And he said, well, the first thing you should do is go talk to an accountant. And my background, the area of New Orleans where I live, I didn't know any accountants. So it was a struggle to even find an accountant to even talk to. So I eventually found somebody that was an accountant. I sat down with them, talked to them about their career, and I realized that I never want to be an accountant in my life. There's nothing, I don't want to pursue being an accountant. It seems like either there was two options. Either you were going to be facing a wall, or you were going to be facing a wall that has a window next to it. And that was just something I was not interested in. I wanted to be more outgoing, something that was a little bit on the road. And so I had already invested 3 years of my life into pursuing an accounting degree. And I thought to myself, you know what? Fast forward, we're in 2019, that was in 2004, 2005. Wouldn't it be cool if we could interview some people based on what their college career track took them to, or what field that they were interested in, and see how they either got to where they are, and I mean, would they even do it again, right? And so that's what we're doing here. Thank you so much for watching this video. So now let me introduce my guest. We have Jason Rubin. So Jason, tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your specific title?
So I'm a Foreign Service Officer for the U.S. Department of State. Most people think of that job as being a diplomat. So when I'm overseas, I'm a U.S. diplomat.
Gotcha. And so on your business card, does it say diplomat or?
No, so that depends on the job. So diplomat is a general title, but there's lots of things involved. So my last job, I was a vice consul. So on my business card, it said vice consul.
Gotcha. So it sounds like your position is so it sounds like a diplomat is like one layer of what you do, and then there's roles that you play inside of.
Maybe the best analogy might be like someone who's in the Marine Corps is a Marine.
Okay.
But their job is a jet pilot or an infantryman.
Excellent. So now, what did you went to college for? Like, what did you graduate in college?
So I was an industrial engineering major in college.
You were an industrial engineering
engineering, so.
And so were you on the diplomat track? Or?
No, not at all. So back then I was still actually in the Marine Corps. So I enlisted in the Marine Corps out of high school, and then through a commissioning program, the Marine Corps sent me to college. And at the time, I didn't, maybe a little bit similar to you in that my dad was an engineer, his brothers were engineers, I liked math and science, I thought that's what I wanted to do.
Gotcha.
And after getting my degree, I did work, I mean, you could say in a technical field. I was a pilot, so that the engineering did come into play there, but industrial engineering generally has very little to do with diplomacy.
Gotcha. So you're like a real pilot?
Yeah, a real pilot.
Like the one that kids want to be when they grow up?
Yeah, I got this cool sunglasses and everything.
Nice. Do you want to tell them about the mattress story? Or?
I could, I suppose. Maybe I can make a brief version.
A brief version, yes.
So I should start off the plane that I used to fly. It's called the Harrier, which is it's a fighter jet or attack jet, but it takes off and lands like a helicopter does.
Gotcha.
So when I was learning how to fly the Harrier, it was only my 6th flight in the plane, and there was a landing gear malfunction, and this is the long story part that I'll make shorter, but we were ordered to raise the landing gear and land vertically on a stack of mattresses. This was the commanding officer that thought this was a good idea. And and I was a brand new student pilot, and I thought at the time it was kind of a crazy idea, but thankfully this was one of the two-seat planes, so I had the instructor in the back seat.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So he's helping you.
He thought it was a little crazy idea too, but we kind of talked through all of our procedures. It's actually a really good experience in how to handle emergencies and how to deal with conflicting information when your boss is telling you to do something that is kind of against the rules. But long story short, we came in to land, and they had these mattresses all strapped down, tied together, soaked with water. They did all the preparations they could to land a jet on top of them.
Right.
But got to about 25 feet in the hover, so like a helicopter sitting over it, and I saw something shoot up on either side of the cockpit.
Was it the mattress?
It was a couple mattresses. So you have to imagine it's not a helicopter, it's a jet shooting straight down. So the pressure and the heat is so intense. And then once one mattress was out of the stack, it's loose, so it's all bouncing around, and came down a little further, and then the next mattress, the next thing I saw was just a shotgun blast out of the front, and that was one of the mattresses going in the intake of the engine and out the outtake. And as soft as a mattress is, you have to remember the inside, it's got metal springs and stuff. So
yes, that doesn't sound like a good idea at all.
Just like in the movies, all the gauges went to red and the alarms were going off, and came down a little faster at that point. But set down, shut the plane down, hopped out, and now I'm famous as being that Harrier guy who landed on the mattresses.
Nice. And I think that there's a Google image of you doing that.
Yes, if you search for Harrier mattress landing, that's
you. That's you. Excellent. So you're watching a famous person right now. So I guess your first career would have been in the Marine Corps?
Correct, yeah. So
okay.
21 years in the Marine Corps.
21 years. Thanks for your service.
Thanks.
When you were in school, what was your favorite subject?
It was, I would say, science. I was okay at math. I wouldn't say I liked it, but it was kind of a means for me to get to science. I had some really good science teachers, thankfully, growing up. And like I said, my dad was an engineer. I always kind of was interested in that field. Okay.
Can you remember like your most memorable teacher?
Yeah, I think there was my physics teacher in, I want to say, 11th grade, 10th or 11th grade.
Okay.
This guy was one of these rare teachers that just was really passionate about what he was teaching. And for me, physics was so amazing too, because it was the first time I could put all that math to use. It seemed like I was that stereotypical kid who said, like, why do I have to learn this? There's calculators out there, like, why do I need to know how to do all this?
Right.
But physics, and this teacher in particular, was really good about trying to relate things to the real world. So we'd work out all these problems, and then when we were done and found a solution, we would do an experiment or we would demonstrate that principle.
Right.
So like launching a catapult or something and predicting where the ball is going to land. Little things like that just made me realize that science was exciting and it was something that actually had an impact in the real world.
Gotcha. And what was that teacher's name? Do you remember?
Oh, so my one weakness in this world is, of many actually, but is names. I can't think of his name off the top of my head.
Gotcha. Okay. So it sounds like you went into college for the thing that you were also interested in high school. And so what was your major again?
Industrial engineering.
Okay, industrial engineer, and then that led to you becoming an airplane pilot, or a pilot, sort of?
Kind of in parallel. So I knew that the benefit of that program in the Marine Corps sending me to college was that I had obligated service afterwards. So after I graduated, I became an officer, so I initially enlisted. So I knew I was going back to the Marine Corps and I wouldn't be able to work as an engineer for at least several years, at least 4 years. So I initially kind of wanted to go more towards electrical or computer engineering.
Right.
But I had an advisor in college she was actually former military. And I said, look, I want to study engineering, but I know if I'm out of the field for 4 years, a lot of this stuff will just advance and I won't be up to speed on things. So she had steered me towards, there's a couple different fields, but industrial engineering in particular is something that is applicable in lots of different areas, but also it's not necessarily on the technological edge, that if you're not up to date on the latest computer language, that you're out of the game.
Right.
So that's what kind of led me down that road. And then the pilot thing, I actually did not, I didn't go into it expecting or wanting to be a pilot, but at the time, the Marine Corps really needed pilots, and they were kind of recruiting heavily. And I thought, hey, if they need people, maybe... I always thought it was something impossible, that only the cream of the crop get to do that. So I said, why not? And I took the test and passed the written test, did my physical, and then next thing I knew, they had guaranteed me a slot in flight training. So
just like that?
Just like that.
So from the time you enlisted, did you enlist, 17 or 18?
18. I went to boot camp the day after my 18th birthday. You could tell I was anxious to get out of the
house. So when did you start? When did you have your first flight? Do you remember?
Oh, so from enlisting, so I served enlisted for 5 years, and then got the commissioning program, so 4 years at school, and then about a year of training. So probably about from the day I swore in at boot camp to the day I flew a military plane, it was probably about 10 years.
Gotcha, okay.
So I actually did some, before I went to school, you could say I was an engineer. I was an engineer mechanic. So when I was enlisted, my main job was to fix engineering equipment.
Okay, gotcha. Now your primary role now, so you went from the Marines, so the Marines pilot or engineer pilot, that was like your first career, and now the Foreign Services diplomat, that's your second career.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
What does it take to become a diplomat / foreign service officer?
Sure. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. The State Department has a very specific hiring process for diplomats, for foreign service officers. I say double-edged sword because on one side, it's very straightforward and clear. There's a test, basically, and it's broken into 3 sections. You have a written test. You have a section where kind of like an essay portion where you respond to questions in written form.
Right.
And then the third part is the oral exam, and that has kind of a traditional interview. It has a leadership exercise and some other things you do face-to-face. And then based on those results, you get a score and get ranked, and depending on how many people they're hiring, you get called up. There's a lot of other federal jobs or other jobs for government agencies that aren't so clear-cut. It's some of the hiring process is a little cloudy on how that's actually works. So the Foreign Service in that way is very good. On the negative side of it is it's challenging. It's a long process.
It is.
I started the application process while I was still in the Marine Corps. It was 2 years before I retired, I think, that I actually further out than that I started the process.
Before you knew that you got in?
Yes. So when I retired, like spent my last day in uniform, I still wasn't sure that I was going to have this job.
Okay.
I had actually started lining up other interviews and things like that.
So from the time that you applied to the time you get the job, do you think it was 2 years, 3 years?
It was from the day I actually applied, like took the written test, to when I showed up for work the first day was probably about 18 months, I want to say.
Okay.
And that's kind of on the quick side of things.
Right.
They're working to make things a little bit quicker with that. A lot of it has to do with security clearance. That takes some time too. But even though I had one from before, it's a long, complicated process.
Gotcha. And so your job does require security clearance?
Yes.
Does it require like a special type or?
It's kind of the standard. It's a top secret clearance for most government jobs at this level require. It's the same as those. It's not. It seems pretty standard for what I'm used to for other government positions.
Okay. And the clearance is paid for by the Foreign Services?
And you don't have to have one coming in when you first apply. That's part of the process of the application. So after you pass the test, after you do all those points, the very last thing you do is fill out all your paperwork for the security clearance. And then it's just a matter of waiting until
Gotcha.
that gets through. I will say one of the things I've been most impressed with the Foreign Service, especially coming from a place like the Marine Corps, is the diversity in the department.
Oh, yeah.
In that, I mentioned it because you asked about security clearance. I think a lot of people think, oh, I want to work for the FBI, or I want to work for this agency or that, and then I need to have some job with security clearance to get in. But, or I have to have specific experience as a law enforcement person to work in this job. But the State Department wants, at its essence, a diplomat is a representative of the United States of America.
Right.
So we want people from every walk of life, from every background. So the example I always give is the first day of work I showed up and sat down in my kind of initial training course. I introduced myself to the person on my left, the person on my right. And here I am, a 21-year Marine veteran, jet pilot. The person to my left was a professional dancer. And the person to my right was a brand new young woman out of graduate school.
Oh, wow.
And that's just a small segment. The whole class was made up of people with just an incredible variety of experience and knowledge. And it's great working with people like that, too.
Was that surprising?
It was. Honestly, I didn't know what to expect. Like I said, I joined the day after my 18th birthday, so my entire adult life had been in the military.
Right.
And I had just kind of gotten used to that's what government service is like. I knew it would be different than the military, but I didn't think it would be that broad of a organization.
Gotcha. What is so right now? So I know this about you, but you're going into a new assignment, right?
Right.
What is your next assignment that you're going into? Can you speak about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So just one more thing with one thing about the Foreign Service as being there's different types of diplomats, different types of Foreign Service officers.
Okay.
I'm what's called a generalist, which means I can kind of fit into a lot of different jobs. So my last job, I was a visa officer.
Okay.
But this next job, I'll be a management officer, which is very different types of work.
Gotcha.
So this next job, I will be, the position is actually called General Services Officer. And I'm kind of the administrative and logistics person at the embassy. So I'm the one that kind of keeps things running. Whether it be, I manage the local staff that we have work there. So I'm going to Cameroon, to Yaoundé, Cameroon.
Right.
And we have a large local staff of people that work in the warehouse that move all of our stuff around the embassy. We have a fleet of cars with drivers. I'll manage them. We have to buy things out there. We have to construct things for the embassy. We have to manage housing. Be in charge of that. And then also bringing things in and out of the country. So shipping, whether that's someone's goods, things that we've purchased, or other important material. I have to work with the local customs officials to get the things in and out. And as you can imagine, different countries, that presents different challenges.
I can only imagine at this time.
Yeah.
What is the other type of diplomat? So there's the generalist, and then what is the other
Sure.
type?
So the two main kinds you have are generalists and specialists.
Okay.
So generalists there's 5 main fields of generalist, and that's consular, so like a visa officer.
Okay.
You have management, which is what I'm doing. You have political, economic, and public diplomacy.
Okay.
So I talked about the first two. Political and economic are similar, they just focus on different areas, but they're the ones that are, their job is to meet with local officials that in those fields. So political officials are key economic influencers in the country, learn everything they can about it, and then report back to the U.S., and then also implement our political and economic policy there.
Okay.
And then public diplomacy officers are kind of like public affairs.
Okay.
So in those 5, we can all move around and do everyone else's job.
Right.
But then you have Foreign Service specialists. So they will do one job their whole career. They'll work in different embassies, but they do one job. So these are fields that require some specialization. So, for example, our IT folks,
Yeah.
right? I mean, they need special training to do that. So there's that. There's diplomatic security, so our security agents. We have, what else? We have certain like kind of office specialists. We have another job is courier. So when we send sensitive things in and out of the country, some things we can mail, some things we can ship, but other things have to be accompanied by someone. And we actually have a group of diplomats that's their main job, is to accompany and coordinate these shipments all over the world.
Interesting.
Yeah, they have some great stories.
That I could imagine. That I can imagine. So you're going to the Cameroon this next time, which is in Africa.
Yeah.
And your last post was where?
Guangzhou, China. So
Guangzhou, China.
Biggest city in the south of China.
Gotcha. How long were you in Guangzhou?
For 2 years.
2 years. Okay. How long will you be in the Cameroon?
Should be for 2 years as well.
Do people call it the Cameroon or
No, just Cameroon.
Cameroon? Okay. It feels like a the place. Yeah.
I'll suggest it when I go.
Yeah. Do you work alone or do you work with others?
Pretty much always with others.
With others, okay.
Yeah. And that's with other Americans and also with local staff. I think a big misconception is that it's only Americans in these embassies overseas, but the vast majority of our employees are actually from the country we're working in. Now it's always Americans that are supervising and always Americans that are making policy decisions and things like that. But,
Okay.
having that local staff, we come in and out, the Americans. 3 years, maybe 4 years at the most, we'll have a tour.
Right.
So we actually rely on them a lot. This is the institutional knowledge that we had some of the visa clerks that had worked there for 30 years. So they know how things work, and they know there's only so much I can learn in a couple years there too about the population. So we rely on them for local knowledge and things like that too. So.
Cool. Do you like that arrangement, the working with others?
I love it. It's one of my favorite things about the job. With my American colleagues, like I said, just such a wide variety of talents. There's always someone that has some experience in something. You have some case about wire fraud. Well, you find the guy that used to work for the Department of Justice and used to investigate that. You find some case where it has someone is claiming to be a famous artist. Well, this person has studied art. They have a PhD in Asian art, so they can actually provide that stuff. So working with like a talented pool like that is amazing. And then with the local staff, my experience in China was they were incredibly hardworking and dedicated people, and a lot of them they weren't just great colleagues, but also great friends. So
nice.
I really enjoyed that. And it's a vision into kind of the local culture that you don't normally get.
Right, I can imagine, especially because that's your first time visiting Guangzhou, was it?
Yeah, my first time in China, for sure.
Would you go back?
Yes, I would go back.
What do you like best about your job, or what do you like least about it?
So best, I would say, I kind of mentioned the people. I like that, but otherwise, it's the most obvious. But the opportunity to travel like this, not just for me. I traveled when I was in the Marine Corps, but always by myself. But in this job, I get to take my family with me. So my wife and 3 kids get to experience these amazing places, and just getting a perspective that I wouldn't, or certainly my kids wouldn't, in doing any other job. Least kind of ties in with that would be kind of the unpredictability. So even though I love the opportunity to go to all these different places, every 2 to 3 years I basically have to find a new job. And that can be stressful, and you don't really know where you're going next until maybe about a year out. So it makes it a little difficult to plan. And also, friends and family back here in the U.S., we come through on intervals, as you know.
Right, I do.
But we don't. It's hard to maintain. It's harder to maintain those relationships in a job like this.
I see. Is it you'll be traveling is it 2 years on, 1 year off? 3 years on, 1 year out? Like, is it a set schedule like that, or?
Not necessarily. So your first 2 tours are generally 2 years apiece.
Okay.
And then after my tour in Cameroon, it'll probably be 3-year tours with a few exceptions. And there's not necessarily a set point that you have to come back to do a U.S. tour, but generally every 3 tours, between 2 or 3 tours, it's encouraged to come back and work at the headquarters and kind of see how things work there.
Gotcha. Okay. Is this this is off the questionnaire, but do you retire inside of the diplomat position? Is it like a forced retirement at a certain age, or do you get to determine when you get out or stay?
Yes. So it is I probably should know this better, but I believe 65 is the mandatory retirement age.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure you can stay beyond that if you make it to, there's kind of like a senior rank called Senior Foreign Service, kind of the equivalent of a general in the military. Much in the same way, for certain restrictions disappear once you become a general.
Hold on. There we go.
So if you get to that senior level, then I think you can stay beyond the 65.
Okay.
But I can basically stay, once I get tenure, I can stay as long as I want to, until I do something really, really stupid.
You seem like you're excited about this. I guess we would have to check with the missus to see if she is as excited as you.
Yeah, well, we've always said we'll do it until it stops being fun. So
gotcha.
Right now it's still fun.
That's good. Let's see. What are some typical kinds of decisions you have to make at work?
Well, I mean, most basically, when I was in China, my primary responsibility when I was a line officer was I would make 120 decisions in every shift, whether this person was in accordance with the law, whether they would be allowed to travel to the United States.
Just to clarify, so in Guangzhou, people had to come through your office to get, approval to travel to the United States.
Right, they would come to get their visa.
Right.
So in many ways, we're the first line of defense for U.S. national security. So anyone that wants to travel to the United States has to come to an embassy or consulate to get their visa, and we're screening them for that. Not just for whether they're going to overstay or misuse their visa, but whether they're a security threat as well.
Right.
So I'd make those decisions, and then, like I said, when I was an investigator, deciding whether these people were guilty or not of, I don't make the ruling whether they're guilty, but whether the facts support a finding, whether they committed visa fraud.
Okay.
In this new position, I'll be responsible for a large staff, so I'll be making decisions about their employment and taskings and things like that.
Okay. What do you know what the salary range is for, I guess, a diplomat?
Yeah. So for entry-level officers, there's kind of a range that State Department actually does a pretty good job of. There's a standard scale depending on your experience, your education. They kind of give you a baseline. This is the rank you will be.
Okay.
And then the pay along that is, they'll match your prior job up to, they have a limit.
Yes.
So you can pretty much come in making what you were, unless you're making some insane salary. But I know I did look it up, and like at the very lowest, so just a high school diploma with no experience coming in as a generalist, I think it's around $45,000 a year.
Okay.
And then the high end of that is $85,000.
Okay.
And that's our basic pay. The other nice thing is that the job comes with a lot of perks and benefits.
Okay. And so what are the perks and benefits that come with this job?
Yeah, so first off, overseas, depending on what country you're posted in, you kind of get additional allowances. And those are based on two things. One is the cost of living there. So if you're posted somewhere that's very expensive to live, they do give you extra money to kind of make up for that. And the other thing is most people think of it as the danger quotient, but it's more than just physical danger. It's things that it's kind of an equation they put together based on the security situation, other health issues, how difficult it is to find certain, basically how miserable it is to live. So a place like London, for example, you don't get any extra money in that. You might get extra money for the cost of living,
yes.
but none for the misery component. But someone posted in Kabul,
yes.
right? They get paid a little bit more for that.
Just a little bit.
But also you get a education allowance for your kids. So my kids go to international schools overseas,
right?
And that's fully paid for. And then the international schools overseas are private schools, and they're usually very high quality schools.
Do you remember how much the school that your kids were in at Guangzhou cost per year?
I don't remember the exact amount, but I could say with 3 children going to that school in China, it was the equivalent of me getting almost a 100% pay raise.
Nice.
And not all schools are that expensive,
yes.
But so that's a huge benefit. And then housing is paid for. So wherever we go, I don't pay rent when I'm overseas. And even when I'm back here for training, if I was posted in DC working at the State Department, I would pay for housing, but back here for training, my housing is paid for.
Nice. What about healthcare, vacation time, stuff like that? Does that? I'm pretty sure that.
Yeah, so we get kind of the standard government employee healthcare plans, which are pretty good. There's actually kind of a special one for us because we were using out-of-network. You can imagine the HMOs here don't have approved doctors in Yaoundé, Cameroon,
yes.
But so they can kind of take care of all that. And then vacation is pretty good. It kind of goes up the longer you've been in, but I think starting off you get about 2 to 3 weeks a year. One of the nice things in China was there's a lot of Chinese holidays. So we get, the majority of our staff are Chinese, so we get American holidays and Chinese holidays. So,
nice.
That helps to supplement the holidays as well.
Nice. Hopefully Cameroon has as many holidays.
I'm hoping. Let's see.
What about retirement benefits? Any retirement benefits?
Yeah, so there's the thrift savings plan, kind of like the government 401k, and then there's actually also a pension if you make it to. That I don't know the exact metrics for when it starts, but kind of the standard government retirement, federal government retirement that way.
Okay. Do you know what the basic level of education or training is required to get your position?
Yeah, so that's the interesting thing. Like I said, that test is kind of the great equalizer. So there's no specific requirement.
So you don't need do you need a college degree?
You do not. I'm pretty sure you need a high school diploma. But
okay.
There was a guy in my initial training class that did not have a college degree. Now, it's much harder for someone like that to, not to just score well on the test, but to, like I said, a lot of it is that face-to-face, and they're going to want to know kind of what experience and knowledge you have. So,
right.
But it's certainly possible. There's no requirement. So there's that, and then you had people with multiple PhDs.
Interesting.
Because I should say the State Department is looking for leaders and people who can make decisions and take risks, more so than they're looking for like some brilliant academic that knows a lot about one little thing.
Okay. What would you say are the skills needed for the job that you're doing?
So I'd say, kind of like I said, the ability to make decisions and take risks and kind of mitigate those two. So you're, I think we've talked about kind of making a good decision now instead of a perfect decision later.
Right.
You have to be flexible. The job changes daily, sometimes on an hourly basis, so you have to be flexible. The only other thing I'd say is I think it helps if you have a positive attitude. And I say that because sometimes you're posted in places that aren't luxurious and aren't so wonderful. And even when you are, there's crises that happen and things that come up, and the job can be difficult at times.
Right.
And I think people who seem to do the most, or do the best, are the ones who can deal with the challenges and kind of focus on the good things that they have. Whereas the people who seem to always just worry about what they don't have or what's not available, it can be a tough life for them.
What about I know you haven't mentioned it yet, but there is a language requirement for the job as well.
Yeah, so that's a good point. I guess I hesitate to say you should be someone who's good at languages because this is something actually that's very different about the way the United States does this. Most other countries, they take people who are specialists in an area or speak another language, and then they train them to be diplomats. The US finds people that they think make good diplomats with their experience, and then train them to speak languages.
Yes.
So I've learned Chinese and French just in my short time with the department, and that I see as a benefit. I mean,
Right.
I'm getting this free education, but it can be tough. The State Department doesn't want to spend a lot of time and money training people, so they've perfected a method that can train you in the minimum amount of time, but to be at a conversational level. So if you absolutely hate learning languages, then maybe
This may not be the career for you.
But I'd also say if you think you're someone who, I've never been good at languages, that was me, they have a good method. And that if that's the one thing, it shouldn't discourage you from becoming a diplomat.
Can you just speak about the language training just a little bit?
Sure. So maybe the best one is to talk about Chinese because that was the first time I'd really studied a foreign language other than a class in high school that I never paid attention to. I'm sorry, Mr. Lewis. But it was very intimidating at first because they don't, so it's not a class like you sit in a college auditorium with a bunch of people. You are in a small room with 2 or maybe 3 other people, and the teacher teaches you directly and you talk all the time. Because it's one thing to be able to read and write and understand things, but the thing that's most important to diplomats is we're engaging with our interlocutors and our other just people in the community directly, and you have to be able to speak and communicate that way. So
Would you call them
interlocutors? So like and
you said it's an
interlocutor.
Interlocutor.
I believe that's how you pronounce it.
Okay.
But someone that you work with, like not a colleague would be someone you work with in the same company, but this would be someone like your counterpart, maybe would be the right word.
Okay.
So like I said, for a political officer, that might be someone who works at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or someone in their Senate.
Okay.
Anyway, so the language training is very intense in that way, and I'll be honest, it's very stressful at times. And I use Chinese as the reference because at the time I thought, even though I was progressing, it seemed like I'm never going to be able to learn this. But after 30 weeks, I was giving discussions on nuclear proliferation and engaging in debates about immigration in Chinese. So it's amazing what they can do in that period of time.
And the class took 30 weeks? Was it the 30 weeks?
30 weeks.
30 weeks.
I did the math, and I think if you count the hours, because a full day, you're doing 8 hours of language training, basically.
Right.
5 of those in a class and 3 kind of independent study. But if you took the courseware and compared it to a college class, I think we did a semester of college Chinese it's like 3 weeks or 4 weeks or something insane. Like, because we started off using college books, but we just burned through them.
Yeah.
But it paid dividends. I mean, my experience in China, my ability to do my work was, I would not have been able to have that experience without the language.
Good. And I'd imagine now when you go to a Chinese restaurant, you can order.
I get the best stuff, so come with me.
What personal qualities, emotional, physical, and mental, does a person need in order to do well and be happy in your job? I know one of the things you mentioned was having a positive attitude. Mm-hmm. Anything else you can think of?
Well, talking about language made me think of it, but being able to fail and accepting that. So one of the things is this job, by the type of people it attracts and by the nature of the screening process, which is pretty intense, you wind up, like, I'm the dumbest guy in the room. Like, there's some really talented people who have done nothing but succeeded in everything they've ever tried to accomplish.
Except language.
Except language. But you put that person in a classroom and they can't form a simple sentence like, the shoe is brown, and it drives them nuts.
Does it?
It drives me nuts too. So being able to kind of accept when you fail and continue on, that helps not just in language training, but in the work we do. I mean, diplomacy is, it's very much a soft business, right? Like we're trying to persuade people, we're trying to work with people that have totally different ideas about culture and things. So there's going to be times where you fail.
Right.
And you can't just try harder and do it again the same way. You have to learn from each time you fail, and then change that tact and kind of build on that knowledge and be open to other things. So I think having that ability to fail and then learn from it and keep going is something that gets you a long way in this job.
Good. Do you feel like you had that before you went through the language training, or did the language training teach you that you had that skill?
I mean, the language training was an extreme of that, but I joke that one of the best things prepared me to be a diplomat before doing it was going through flight training.
Oh.
Number one, because it made me think on my feet and make quick decisions. But the other thing was learning how to fail. Because let me tell you, I mean, flying those planes are hard. And I screwed up a lot of times.
Yeah.
And you don't really have a choice. You just got to kind of get back up and try it again the next day and really focus on what you messed up and fix it the next time. And you know, you just take those little steps each time. And after the first week, your pride is totally gone. And then you can get on with the work that needs to be done. So I feel like with that, it helped me in language, but also in the job that I can screw up, I can admit it, and I can learn from it.
What things did you learn in school that help you most in this work? Are there any hobbies or activities outside of school that are important lessons for this work?
School, like, I mean, if you're talking about like high school and junior high, if I can even remember back that far. I don't know, I think one of the things that comes to my mind that helped me out early on was kind of that desire to travel, and I didn't really get to travel until I joined the Marine Corps, but I was still pretty young when I went overseas. But I did grow up in Miami, a city which is a very multicultural city, and I don't know what it was exactly that kind of sparked that interest in going abroad or learning about different cultures, but I'd like to think maybe some of that was from back then. Yeah.
Anything from college? Anything from college prepared you for what you're doing now?
Well, I will say that, you know, some people would say, you're an engineer, why are you doing it? It has nothing to do with what you're doing now.
That is true.
But I think we live in a much more data-centric world, and I mean, even in my job, it's driven by statistics and analysis of this. So having that background in math and science, I think has helped me kind of use those tools. You know, there's some people, and this is in any field, that I feel either kind of embrace technology and try to use it to do a better job, to accomplish what they're trying to do. And then there's some people that, for different reasons, but a lot of times just because they're scared, or I'm not good at that, I've never been good at math, they kind of just push it away. And some of them still manage to do great things, and they find ways around it, but I think having that skill or having that background has really helped me work more efficiently and get more done.
Cool. What can I do now? So think about this question from a kid's perspective. What can I do now to help prepare me for this career? So if somebody's in high school or junior high school watching this video, or even in college, and they say, you know what, I want to be a foreign service officer, a U.S. diplomat, what would you recommend they do?
Sure. Well, first off, I'd say try.
Sure.
I think a lot of, I was exposed to this job a long time ago, and it seemed like the coolest job in the world. But
who exposed you to the job?
So when I was a young Marine, after I was an engineer, but before I went to school, I was a Marine security guard, so I was one of the Marine guards at the embassies.
Oh.
So I used to buzz them in every day and wave to them and keep them safe.
Right.
But they just seemed like these people that were, these brilliant scholars, and I would never be anything like that. So that's why I say to try. So if it's something that...
Hold on. So when you were working at the embassy, did somebody talk to you about the opportunity? Like, did you ask them? Did you inquire then?
To some extent. So because I was working on the security side of things, if I didn't get the program that I was to become an officer and go to school, I had reached out to some of the diplomatic security agents, and I probably would have gone that route and maybe tried to pursue something in that way. But now, at the time, that's what I was most interested in, but now I think this is a much better fit for me. This is the kind of work that I'm more interested in.
Excellent.
Sorry, but you asked about...
preparing, so...
Yeah, so try. So first thing, I'll just give a little plug. So anyone who's interested can go to careers.state.gov, and it actually tells you about all the different things, like all the process, the test, what the different jobs are, what life is like as a diplomat. They even have videos and interviews, not quite as well done as these, I'm sure. So that's one thing. And then the next would be, if you're a young person, try to learn another language. It will, not just for this job, but
just general?
Yes, it just opens up so many doors, and
how so? What do you think it does for you?
I think from every bit of it. From one end of it, literally it makes your brain more efficient. It makes these connections that other types of learning do not provide. But also whatever language that you choose, it's a look into a completely different culture that you would never get otherwise, and it changes your perspective about things. So for example, growing up in Miami, the vast majority of my classmates spoke Spanish. A lot of them, Spanish was their first language.
Right.
Because I was a stupid young teenager, I did not want to learn Spanish. And someone might say, like, oh, I grew up with a lot of my friends were Hispanic. A lot of my friends were from South and Central America. So I know about that culture, but I don't think you can truly know about it until you can really interact with someone in their, I wish I could remember. I think it might be Nelson Mandela who said this, that when you speak to someone in a I'm gonna mess this up, and this is on video, but the idea is if you speak to someone in a common language,
right,
you speak to their mind, maybe let's say that. But when you speak to someone in their mother tongue, you speak to their soul. And I think there's just a level that of understanding that you can get with another group when you do that, and when you can watch movies that are in that language, and when you can read books. And when you're young, oh my God, your brain is much better designed to learn languages than this old thing. So
I think you're doing a fine job in this group. So the next question is, would you allow me to arrange a job shadow if I wanted to learn more about this career? Is there job shadowing in the...
I will tell you what, Abraham, if you come to Yaoundé, I will take you to work for the day.
Yeah.
I will drive you around in an armored vehicle. I'll show you all the cool stuff there is there. You can shadow me for a day.
As cool as that sounds, I will need permission from my wife. I will show her this video and see what she says.
No, but so we don't have job shadowing in that way, but there actually are. State Department's really big on internships.
Okay.
And I worked with a bunch of them in China, and I'm sure I'll work with some in Cameroon as well. It's a really good program, I think. If you go to that same website, I'm sure there's links to find out information
about the internships.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of the Foreign Service officers I work with now started off doing internships.
As an intern. Okay. All right. Last question, or second to last question. What would you tell 17-year-old Jason if he would listen?
Sure. So I kind of hinted at it, but I would tell him to learn a language, to put some effort into it and do that. But that would probably be the main thing.
That would be the main thing? Gotcha. Is there one book you would recommend to our audience if they wanted to either learn about this career or something that you're interested in at this time?
That is a good question. There is, I mean, if you're really a diplomacy nerd, if you really, there's a book called America's Other Army, which is about the State Department and how kind of we use diplomacy. There's a lot of people have this mixed idea of what diplomats do. The idea is we sit around drinking champagne with foreign leaders and drive around limos, and it's really not that at all. There's a lot of kind of groundwork and difficult things that diplomats have to do, and that book in particular, I think, does a good job of kind of capturing the importance of what we do and kind of the nitty-gritty of it.
Gotcha. Well, we're at the end of the interview. Did you want last word? You want to share anything?
No, I'll just say that thanks for having me. I really am excited about this kind of project you're doing, and I'm honored to be the first guest on it.
Oh, hey, I'm honored that you said yes.
Thanks. Thanks, and I hope can reach someone out there that might be a future diplomat, that maybe I'll work for you someday as an ambassador. So
there you go.
That'd be great.
There you go. Hey,
all right.
Jason, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And this is Abraham Walker signing off, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace. I thought that went fine, right?
Yeah, that went good. I didn't run my mouth too long.
Well, that's the good thing about, since we already know each other.